Teacher ethics. This article and this entire lecture will be about teaching educators ethics. This article talks about Australia as well as the United States. Australia has a very good education system, and whenever you're looking at research articles, usually look at Australia, United States, and Turkey. That's the three big research area for secondary education that produces a lot of articles. This boom appears to be absent from teacher education programs in Australia and the United States. So this article discusses the weakness in a lot of these education systems, pre-service teachers that were not teaching value or ethics education. It's also known as moral-based. We'll look at that. So down here it says, quality teachers are considered to be those individuals whose pedagogy is grounded in values and beliefs that tend to be caring, positive teacher-student relationships embedded in trust and high standards of professional ethics. So quality teachers are teachers who have strong ethics. So are we teaching ethics? That becomes the question, and that's what they're leading towards. For instance, Newman, 1996, and Darling, 96, studied student attainment is enhanced by effective teachers who are not only technically competent with good subject and pedagogical knowledge, but also are able to form positive relationships and be a positive role model for their students. So that's the point of this article. That's the point of this lecture, is how do we get student teachers to become value-based and have a good code of ethics. So let's just look at a little quick video on student teachers and positive role models and their relationships that they have.
I think in high school it's really important for a teacher to have a personal connection with their student, because that just makes the experience much better, and that helps a student learn a lot more about the real world, about what's actually out there. So a teacher can talk about, it's the way that the teacher expresses their talent to us that shows us that maybe that's the way we should think. Maybe that's the way the world is looking at us and how we should look at them.
I think it's very important for a teacher to be a friend, but also to distinguish the difference that they're not your friend and that they're your teacher as well. But as long as you have that type of connection where you guys can talk about things that are more than just school related, I feel like it strengthens your relationship with the school itself, and it makes you feel a lot more comfortable in the classroom if you're speaking in front of people or just getting your work done, and it's a lot easier to ask the teacher questions and come to them with problems that you have if you have a better relationship with them on a more personal level.
Look at my teachers, I'd say I see it as this is a person that I'm going to be spending a lot of time with. I'll be going after school, I'm going to have to do a lot of homework, I'm going to need help. Because, you know, there's some subjects that, you know, I get help at. There's some subjects that I'm good at. And I say, oh, I'm going to have a good time with this teacher because, you know I'm smart at this subject, so we're going to, you know. But then, you know, there's subjects that I'm not all that great at. But then I see the teacher as, she'll work with me or he'll work with me. They'll understand and they'll help me out. As long as I put in the effort to, you know, to work with them.
When I look at my teachers, I see people who are, well, for most of them, because I know I've had some teachers who, you know, shouldn't have been teachers, but when I see my teachers, I see people who are dedicated to their job, who I think the way that they help get through to us is by learning from us. Like, I feel like our teachers, even though they give so much to us every single day, you know, week in and week out, you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly, I think they definitely take a lot away from us as well. And I think, you know, the teachers who, you know, can honestly say that, yeah, you know, my students this and my students that, you know, they may be silly or sometimes they may not always do their work, but I mean, you know, I get a lot from them.
This section right here says what matters most is is quality teachers and teaching supported by strategic teacher professional development. So with that in mind, how can we as College of Educations, as schools of university and higher thinking, prepare our teachers and our in-service teachers to have good ethics training, which this article already says that we don't really have. Right here, it is no surprise then that several initiatives have been proposed to increase the quality of those entering or in the teaching profession. One call to raise the bar was based on the belief that performance pay will increase teacher quality. So we kind of go off tracks a little bit about this value education. And it says maybe if we pay people more money, they'll become better teachers and we'll actually raise the bar. A survey on attitudes to teaching as a career indicates that while those who choose teaching as a career are motivated mainly by factors such as wanting to make a difference and working with children, the most significant factor influencing others is not choosing teaching as a career or leaving it. So money might not be a major issue. Well-qualified, well-paid individuals are not necessarily more likely to be quality professionals. So the more money you pay does not mean that they're going to be more professional. And it says, this little blurb right here, the individuals within the finance sector, which it kind of hints at, these are the people who caused the Great Recession of 2008, that maybe they're an example that the more money you make does not make you an ethically better person. Kind of a dig at that. I thought that was kind of cool. Performance pay might be one way of retaining better teachers, but as a standalone strategy, it is no guarantee that will improve the quality of educators. For what constitutes teacher quality and how to enhance it is neither simple nor clear. So I'm just going to give you a quick video on what's called merit pay, which is also performance enhancing pay. And you kind of see that this becomes not a cure-all, but more of a confusion topic.
Education has always been about evaluating students, but now in the state of Florida, teachers are the ones getting the grade.
It's just more of teaching for the test.
According to a new Florida law, 40% of teachers' evaluation and pay will be directly affected by students' FCAT scores. Right now in Florida, 60% of teachers don't teach an FCAT subject like physical science, education, history, or chemistry, but those same teachers will still be evaluated based off students' FCAT scores. And that doesn't bode well with teachers.
If you don't teach a reading FCAT, you're going to have your evaluation based on what somebody else is doing. That's absurd.
State lawmakers have designed a formula to calculate teachers' pay based off student test scores. The formula takes in certain factors like the number of students in a classroom, whether English is a student's first language, attendance rates, and disability rates.
We come up with an easy-to-score exam. Someone in the Department of Education has some marvelous algorithm by which they figure out whether a student has passed it or not.
The School Board of Alachua County has some major concerns about the new FCAT bill. The primary concern is the lack of funding from the state of Florida.
The state has been very prescriptive about how it wants this done. The problem is they really haven't put any money behind it. So even once we have these statistics and we've looked at the test scores and rated the teachers, there's really no money to provide them additional funding.
The new changes in evaluations for teachers have many public school teachers worried about their job security.
The morale is really bad for teachers right now. They don't have any job security anymore. They don't really know for sure how their evaluation is going to come out because they're being graded on unknown factors, such as the FCAT.
The bill has already taken effect in evaluations for teachers, but it won't impact teachers financially for at least 2 years. Students begin the FCAT in March, and it remains to be seen how merit pay will play out. Mike Gillespie, WUFT News.
So merit pay definitely is an issue where people kind of argue the pros and the cons. The problem with merit pay, which is separate from the research, is just firsthand experience. Merit pay only works when you have money. And if you're offering people $30,000 or $33,000 a year, which is the beginning rate for most educators in Mississippi, when you're offering people $33,000 a year, you really need to give them a max payment, a raise every year. Otherwise, they're losing money. So if you say, everybody starts out at $33,000 in Mississippi, and I'm going to give you we have up to $1,000 pay raise option. If you do well, if they don't get a pay raise, then they're stuck at $33,000. So an administrator is going to try his best to give every one of his educators the maximum pay raise just to keep them. And Mississippi's now, as we've already seen, you already know this obviously, is our pay is based on years of experience and a level of degree. So merit pay is always going to be controversial. I just don't, and this is me speaking, and you can cite me on this one, I don't see how merit pay will ever catch on in Mississippi with the base pay being so low. If we started out at $50,000 a year as educators and we had reserves for merit pay and raises, that might be more effective. But when you're at such a low pay to start with, then that's not going to be good. But remember, the one draw that Mississippi has is a very strong retirement system. So that's a good thing, but merit pay really doesn't tie into that. The article continues and it says that it really just, this whole section right here discusses this idea that there's some confusion about what the definition of a quality teacher is, but maintains a positive, inclusive, and safe learning environment. Most often cited by students who are a demonstrated sense of care and trust. So this is where you start seeing the articles getting into the concept of ethics and just being a good teacher and being a professional person. That good sense of care and trust is a key element of being an effective teacher. So look at here. Empirical studies consistent with these notions suggest that better teacher-pupil relationships may have an impact upon learning, behavior, and attendance. That is true. So think about a relationship that teachers have with students. That caring, that trust is always a big element as well. This research right here says their findings suggest that when the pedagogy employed by teachers was paired with high expectations and beliefs that were socially inclusive and morally defensible, but morally right there tying into ethics, the most vulnerable students in their classes, those from lower socioeconomic status backgrounds, all benefited the most. So that's a very big point. That's why I highlighted so much right here, that when you look at the pedagogy of effective teachers, when they do stuff that's socially inclusive and morally defensible, which means that you are a strong, ethical teacher, it actually benefits the most the students in the lower socioeconomic status the most. So that's good. There's no reason for that. Just a quick video on what if we all as educators had higher expectations. So let's see what you think about this video.
Little 5-year-olds bounce in the classroom door, and within 2 to 3 weeks maximum, they're in an ability group where they're labelled, and for the rest of their school life, pretty much, they remain in those ability groups. It sets them up for either achievement or failure right through schooling. The Teacher Expectation Project was based around my research on high expectation teachers, where I identified particular practices and beliefs of high expectation teachers that differed from those of other teachers. High expectation teachers are those who have high expectations for everybody in their class. And they did things like not ability grouping, for example. They used flexible kinds of grouping. They created a very warm classroom climate so that it became like a little community where everyone worked together. And they set very clear learning goals with their students so the children knew exactly where they were and where they were going next. But they didn't make ability salient in the classroom day after day. Interestingly, New Zealand has the highest grouping rate of any OECD country, and we also have the highest disparity between our highest and our lowest achievers. I don't think that's coincidence. I applied for a Marsden Fast Start grant and I was very fortunate to actually win it. That was an experimental study where we randomly assigned teachers to either the intervention group or the control group, and then the intervention group were trained in the practices of high expectation teachers, and they also learnt about verbal versus non-verbal behaviour.
Why did you not bring your homework in?
Why did you got your tongs?
This one?
He's really happy.
He's probably praising.
He's like praising someone to do something. Like it's the morning.
I was like, come on.
You know better.
Yeah, it's like that.
He's clearly angry.
Why did he do that?
He's telling someone else. He's telling off somebody.
Yeah,
telling off somebody.
He's really angry.
If a teacher expects you to do well, she pushes you and gives you work that's higher than your age.
She doesn't do anything negative, nothing like that. It's everything positive to make you feel better.
It definitely makes me feel more confident.
She would let me do my best, and she'll show me my gaps so I can work on it.
Being part of the Teacher Expectation Project was actually a real blessing. Lots of things just stuck with me. For example, the fact that about 30% of students are actually in the wrong group. They are not being assessed correctly or for whatever reason.
Ability grouping is entrenched in New Zealand, particularly in reading. And interestingly, we got the largest effects in maths. The students in the intervention group gained 28% above what the control group gained over just 1 year. That's more than a whole term's learning in 1 year. And it was mostly, I think, because teachers were more able to move away from ability grouping in maths because it's not quite as entrenched. Whereas in reading, they really struggled. Teachers in New Zealand just don't know how to teach reading without students being in ability groups. I've been developing a proposal for a project that I'm calling the HEIGHT project, which is High Teacher Expectation. We thought that we would train the mentor teachers rather than the teachers themselves, because those are the management people who can then work with their teachers to embed the practices of high expectation teachers. When we had senior management people involved, their students did even better than in schools where management didn't really take an interest. The more that teachers engaged in the practices of high expectation teachers, the greater were the gains for their students.
That's a good video on, how we can raise the bar and have higher expectations. Does that work in all cases? I would say no. You have to be careful with raising the bar. But that also talks about quality teaching. But as you watch that video, you also get the underlying theme that those people are very ethical and very professional, and that's something that we want to make sure we stress. Right here it talks about emphasizing the beliefs that are far more influential than knowledge in determining how individuals organize and define tasks and problems and are stronger predictors of behavior. As we scroll down, pre-service teacher training programs must include a focus on ethics, which elaborates the connections between ethics as well as talks about in science to help teachers deal with the challenges they meet in the classroom. So think back to when you were a teacher or whenever you thought about being a teacher, and have you ever been introduced to ethics? Has anyone ever said, hey, let me show you an ethic video and some dilemma videos? And most time we say, don't touch the students and don't be alone with the students. Well, that's more of a common sense aspect. I'm going to show you some videos over the next couple of little sections of the lecture, which were designed by a corporation, and it just talks about ethical dilemmas that some educators might have. So this would be a good example of how you can teach ethics within a school setting, and just think about some of these scenarios and what you would do put in these situations. So let's go ahead and just look at one of these right now.
As third-year teacher at Littletown Middle School, Terry Sanders brings an infectious energy to her classroom. Both faculty and students like Terry and find it easy to get caught up in her enthusiasm. And like many young professionals her age, Terry is active in social media.
A lot of us here are new teachers. I think Terry's in her third year or so. And most of us are still in our 20s, so we all follow each other on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. And it was never a problem until about a week ago. Her tweet said, "Just saw a cop in the school parking lot with the dog. Hope they don't go near my car. Hashtag just saying hi."
Scott became more concerned about Terry when one of her posts over the weekend seemed to cross the line.
It was Monday morning, and I had some time before my first class started, and so I'm looking up what people did over the weekend, and I find this photo of Terry on Instagram. It looked like she was at some kind of
Hardy. She has teachers and students who follow her. You know, I have no idea who's seen this by now or what, if anything, I should do about it.
I'm going to show you more of those videos throughout the next couple of sections. I actually found those videos quite informative and well developed. This section right here says, support from this viewpoint is found in Campbell. She laminated that teacher education neglects the teaching of ethics. And she urged that more emphasis must be placed on moral and ethical education because teacher training programs are, quote, the initial place to acquaint new teachers with the moral dimensions of their chosen profession, end quote. And that becomes a big idea is, are we teaching educators or future educators the concept of ethics? So let's just go right into another video from the Texas-based company that produced these.
Every Thursday, the Liberty High School Tigers take the baseball diamond to practice. Phys ed teacher and coach Carl Lembach is a dedicated educator and a former minor league player. Even early on in the season, Coach Carl feels pretty good about this year's team.
Well, this is my second year coaching, so it's really starting to come together. We're already 3-0 this season, and those games were against some of the toughest teams in the division. Just a really talented group of kids.
But sometimes, being a coach involves more than simply giving advice on how to field a ground ball. Coach Carl has often played mentor to Tigers star pitcher Johnny Sutton. After Thursday's practice, the coach was caught off guard.
I feel like I've built a lot of trust with my students, and they come to me with lots of questions. Usually they're about conditioning or sports, or even their math homework. All right, guys. Hey, good job today.
Thanks. See you tomorrow, boys. Hey, Coach, do you have a minute?
Yeah, sure, Johnny. What's up?
I need to ask you about something.
What's up?
You know, my girlfriend, Katie?
Yeah.
Well, we just started having sex. And I really don't want to get her pregnant. And I definitely can't go to my mom and dad about this and ask them questions. So, can you help?
That one's a little bit more tricky. I want to apologize. On the previous lecture, I said laminated. I meant lament. I said it twice. I was trying to correct myself, and I watched the video. I watched it again, and I was like, man, I can't believe I didn't say the word lament correctly. So I apologize about that. It shows sometimes my ignorance. But anyway, let's continue on. That video is a little bit more difficult because it shows, a student says, hey, I'm having sex, and talks about birth control. You can tell that just any educator like that, you're like, wow, I don't want to be in this situation. And all of a sudden this student has thrown this at you, and what do you do? And, that's why that's why we always talk about it. How would you handle that? There's no set way to handle that, but you definitely need to be professional. And how would I handle it? I would say, well, let's bring in a counselor to see if we can talk to you. I don't know. I need to get the counseling department to help me out. But then again, that student is asking you, because that student in that situation, he's a coach, trust that coach to help him out. So very delicate situation. He's done nothing to violate ethics, but the student has put him in a very tricky situation where he goes forward is going to be determining if it's ethical or not. This right here says, teachers are now required to guide their students through issues of human rights, conflict resolution, and social justice. Matters include under the auspices of values education. So there's where we see the key word right here, values education. That also pops up. Also can be called ethics and moral education. Down here, without training to develop appropriate skills to teach values in schools, studies have shown that teachers pursue values education with students mostly on the basis of behavior management. So when teachers do not know how to teach value and ethics and those key elements of that. In Mississippi State, we learn value education and social foundations, by the way. But value education, when they don't know how to do that, they go back to just behavior. Yes, sir, no, sir, raise your hand. An ethics curriculum will not only support pre-service teachers in teaching a diverse range of students about morals and values, but also assist them to analyze critically their own personal views as well as practices. So let's just throw another video in there from the same company.
Every Friday, Rockefeller High School English teacher Linda Thomas meets her friends for happy hour. The group usually gathers across town at O'Malley's Pub, but today they decided to hit her friend Matt's favorite restaurant to celebrate his birthday.
So a group of us go to happy hour every week. It's become our ritual. We spend some time together and blow off steam. This time we went somewhere new, which was convenient for me because it was only 2 blocks away from where I work.
As the evening wound down, Linda ordered a final round of shots for everyone.
Oh, no! Birthday boy, Matt. All right, happy birthday, Matt. I'm doing this just for you. 3, 2, 1. Oh. Ow! Oh, yeah. Another round? Oh, my gosh. Oh, my gosh. They were students from my English class. I knew most of them were on the debate team, so they probably just gotten off of practice and decided to get something to eat. They had to have been just as surprised and uncomfortable as I was.
Hey, Linda, are you okay?
Thunder High School is known for its excellent teachers, and social studies teacher David Lowry is no exception. But recently, department coordinator Janet Keegan became concerned about David at a recent parent-teacher conference.
David's a great teacher, and his students love him, but he's a very private person. He's been here 3 years, and we still don't know much about his personal life. Not that it's any of my business, I just like to know my staff. At our spring parent-teacher conference, I noticed David talking with one of the mothers for an extended period of time. If I had to describe their conversation, I would say private. Whatever they were talking about, they didn't want anyone else to hear. I decided to check back later and see if there was a problem with one of David's students. And then I saw that mother was back, again talking to David. This time they were giggling together almost like a couple of teenagers. When I asked him if everything was okay with the mother, he became really nervous and said it was all good. She was just concerned about her son. His behavior was just odd. The next morning, David asked if he could speak with me in private.
The woman you saw me with last night was Gina. We've been dating for 4 months. And yes, her son is one of my students. We actually met through a friend and didn't even make the connection until the second date. I've been meaning to talk to you, but I wasn't sure what to say or how you'd take it.
I know what many educators would say. You say, well, I wouldn't care. Like whatever, I don't care who you date. But you see that puts you in a ethical dilemma because now it puts you in a position of knowing about it. And that's something that I always have trouble with whenever I'm in a situation with a coworker or anyone that I'm in a working environment with. When they bring up an unethical situation and they inform me of that unethical situation, then that puts you as someone who knows about that. The prime example I always give to my students is one time I was working on a board, a soccer board years ago at another city. I was working on a soccer board and a student had and they told us that a coach had touched one of the players, and they were doing an in-house investigation. So I immediately called the police and reported it, and they did an investigation. They investigated it within an hour. The cops were at the girl's house. It turned out it was a false accusation and everything was okay, but that I was upset with the board because I didn't like the idea of, them telling me and saying, we're working on this and we're looking into it. And I was like, no, we need to. This isn't good. So that's one thing that you saw in that video. She just found out that he is dating, and he's trying to smooth it over by saying it's okay, and then all of a sudden the video stops. Like, well, what's going to go on? So it says right here, during the 1970s, an ethics boom occurred to counter the disappearance of ethics education, but it skipped teacher education for some reason. Ethics came throughout all the other fields, but it really didn't see it in education much. Moral themes, value education, and ethics curricula are in their programs. So we're seeing that is coming. It's been brought back a little bit, but we're not seeing much of that in education. Let's do one more of those videos.
Ron Clark has been teaching science at Franklin Middle School for more than 4 years. Recently, he noticed one of his students, Teresa Miller, has been arriving later and later to first period class. Today, she showed up a full 30 minutes after the class started.
I'm sorry, Mr. Clark. I know I'm late again.
Teresa, this is turning into a real problem.
There's nothing I can do about it. My mom got another job, and she doesn't get home from work until after 8.
That's all right. Look, I'll talk to your mom, and we'll figure something out. I could tell Teresa was upset. She lives outside the district, so we don't provide bus transportation for her to get to school. I called Teresa's mom several times, never got a hold of her. I left her a message to please get in contact with me at her earliest convenience to talk about her daughter's late arrivals.
I brought this signed note excusing Teresa for being late to class every morning. This should take care of everything.
No, this note doesn't help Teresa. She's still missing half my class.
Look, I had to take a second job. I'm a single mom with 2 girls. I'm a cook at the retirement center down on Oak Street.
Yeah, I know where that is. It's actually not far from where I live.
It's right by my house, but sometimes breakfast runs late.
Look, I know you need to work. Look, do you have a friend or a relative who can drop your daughter off?
No, it's just me. Look, maybe since you live right near there, I could take her into work with me, and you could bring her into school with you. That would solve everything, right?
Okay, that answer was pretty easy, and you all thought the same thing. No, you've just described an awful situation where I'm now carpooling and I'm the school bus for your daughter, so I'm not going to do that. Of course, you don't want to reply it that way. I don't know why a parent would make that offer, but you can see just how those communications can open up and people say, hey, why don't you do that? But that's just one of those simple people will throw some weird stuff at you. Political and ideological reasons have been proposed for the difficulties faced by those trying to introduce ethics curricula into teacher training programs. So political because some school districts are very political with their school board. And yet there's also expectation by teacher registration boards naturally that professional codes of conduct derived from ethics had been internalized by newly qualified teachers ready to use in the classroom. So what does that mean, that paragraph right there mean? It means this, that we're having issues with teaching ethics because no one really knows what the code of ethics should be. So school boards like the Mississippi Department of Education have passed ethics and code of ethics. So for example, this news article came out a couple of years ago where the state of Mississippi released a code of ethics. So this popped up on everybody's news.
Education officials have a new way to hold teachers accountable inside and outside of the classroom. They've drafted the first statewide code of ethics for educators. 16 WAPT's Meg Pace joins us now. Meg, this is meant to help cut down on those inappropriate teacher-student relationships.
That's right, Darren. The state superintendent says there are just too many of those relationships that have happened in the past few years in the state, so they've drafted this code of conduct to keep the school children safe. 36. That's the number of teachers listed on badbadteacher.com since 2007. It's a website that keeps tabs on teachers charged for inappropriate relationships with students. The state's top educator says he's accountable for bringing that number down.
The children of this state need to be protected.
State officials say it may be more than 36. Even more teachers have been fired but were never charged. Those educators have actually been able to move on to work in other districts and states.
Absent a reporting mechanism and a requirement to report that and a process to manage that once it has been reported, you have the opportunity for these individuals simply to move from one district to another within state, or in some cases move to another state.
So a 20-member task force that was made up of educators, elected officials, and community leaders got together. They drafted the Educator Code of Ethics. This would create a state record that would follow a teacher to his or her next job.
This legislation creates the vehicle, if you will, the mechanisms that we need in order to safeguard children in this state.
This code of ethics will be a first for the state, but some districts already have their own in place, and they go over it every year with their faculty.
Texting, Facebook, social networking, those kinds of things, and the dangers that it can lead to. You would think that in this day and age that teachers and individuals working with students would know certain things are not allowed, but you keep seeing instances of this around the nation.
Clinton school officials believes their code of ethics is proof a statewide one would work to stop inappropriate relationships between educators and their pupils. They've yet to have a staff member end up on badbadteacher.com. Now, the State Educator Code of Ethics was passed out to the House and Senate today. It's now up to state lawmakers to vote it into law. Darren?
Yeah, Meg, if lawmakers pass this Code of Ethics, when will it take effect?
Well, the state superintendent says he hopes it's passed by the end of this legislative session, and if that happens, it'll go into effect before next school year in August.
All right. Thank you for that tonight.
Now, that news article that you just watched was a little bit older, and this is the final product of the Mississippi Department of Education Code of Ethics, which they created. That article talks about a draft. This is the final draft. It's a pamphlet, so that's why it's folded out like this. This is the code shall apply to all persons licensed, and then as you scroll down, it says professional conduct. An educator should demonstrate conduct that follows generally recognized professional standards, and there it is, standard 2, trustworthiness. Standard 3, unlawful acts. Standard 4, just look at this one section right here, educator-student relationships. So let's look at our code of ethics right here. An educator should always maintain a professional relationship with all students both in and outside the classroom. Ethical conduct includes, but is not limited to, the following: fulfilling the roles of mentor and advocate for students in a professional relationship, nurturing the intellectual, physical, emotional, social, and civic potential for all students. And it continues on here. Look at this one. Unethical conduct includes, but is not limited to, committing any act of child abuse, committing any act of cruelty to children, committing or soliciting any unlawful sexual act, engaging in harassing behavior on the basis of race, gender, national origin, religion, or disability, furnishing tobacco, alcohol, or legal authorized drugs to any student, soliciting, encouraging, participating, or initiating inappropriate written, verbal, electronic, physical, or romantic relationship with students. Their letter L is the critical one that so many of our new teachers have trouble with. That means text messages, that's Facebook, that's all that. Look at that, it says right here, inappropriate. Well, what's the definition of inappropriate? Well, it doesn't say that. So there's where they're going to get people on being unethical. They're going to say, okay, you violated 4.2 letter L. And that's what we try to teach educators about that. And we try to tell them, that's a code of ethics right there. And they go, no. I like to use Facebook. I like to use social media. I like to use Snapchat and all those other aspects of the social media. But there's one of the big elements right there. Collegial relationships, alcohol, drug, public funds, and property. And if you scroll up here, Standard 8 and Standard 9, maintenance of confidentiality, that's going to be your FERPA. Breach or contract is a big one. An educator should fulfill all the terms and obligations detailed in his contract. unethical conduct in standard number 10 would be abandoning the contract or refusing to perform services required by the contract. So what does all this mean? Violation of the Code of Ethics for Mississippi educators can result in suspension or removal of your license. So that's why you have to be careful with this. This is the Mississippi Code of Ethics. And you notice that we as college professors, that's what the article kept talking about, is we're not teaching this because the state of Mississippi or any state organization, New Jersey or any state, they're creating these codes of ethics, but are the colleges teaching this? I do teach this, so I'm patting myself on the back a little bit. But you clearly see why this is a delicate situation. Now, of course, we see news stories like the following where you say, why would a teacher do that? But there's also some gray areas on news stories. So just look at this news story right here, and you're going to be like, what in the world?
And now to a story that shocked everyone in our newsroom today. A middle school teacher is out on bond after being charged with giving a student a lap dance in front of the whole class. Tim Wetzel is live at Stovall Middle School in North Harris County with an update on this teacher's behavior. Tim?
Yeah, police say this teacher not only admitted to performing the lap dance, the incident was caught on camera.
Do you want to say anything to your students, to the parents?
No comment. Felicia Smith didn't say much in front of our cameras. It's what prosecutors say she did in front of her class that has her in big trouble. They say the 42-year-old admitted she performed a lap dance on a 15-year-old student at Stovall Middle School. The student told investigators she rubbed her buttocks on him, put her head in between his legs, and then said, quote, "I love you, baby, happy birthday," all while his classmates watched and laughed.
Still, that's it.
Andre Cooper has known Smith for years. He rented a house from her until she evicted him. He says she recently talked about dating another young man, an ex-student who she connected with online.
One of her former students, which he's 21 now, I think it's sad, and I think it's ridiculous. I think they ought to have some kind of ordinance on these school teachers, because a lot of this is happening, a lot of this.
School officials are being tight-lipped about the investigation, refusing to say how they learned about the incident, but they do confirm there is a video that shows Smith dancing around the student.
On a student? No, that's not right. She needs to get it together and go somewhere else. She's a grown lady. Go somewhere else and do that.
Aldine ISD says Smith has worked for the district for some 13 years. She has now been placed on leave. She's being charged with having improper relations with a student. We're live here in North Harris County. Tim Wetzel, KHOU 11 News.
Of course, when you watch that kind of news story, you would say the same thing. What was she thinking? You know, she's got some major issues. She's a predator even. But that would be an extreme violation of Code of Ethics. But I also have to ask this question. Okay, that's an extreme, and that's someone who she later on, by the way, pled guilty and got 3 years of probation. But that's a person who's clearly has an issue. How many violations of the basic Code of Ethics has she had? Did anyone call her on that? The final part of this research article, they interviewed some educators. But this final chart right here talks about, it's just going to give you some quotes. So I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but look at this as we scroll down to collegial ethical issues. A pre-service teacher says leering or sexual innuendos between colleagues, principals, and teachers and students needs to be addressed in their education system. The head of the department says plagiarism works are very important, and teachers say, what do you do when you see indoctrination? So you see with this, different educators have stressed their need for these topics. Look at confidentiality issues. Teachers talking about students' personal family issues in a staff room. A pre-service teacher talks about students' personal issues in a staff room. So they all say the same thing. So this chart's very good because it's going to give you some insight on different levels of people, a head of department, which is the head of the department in the school, like the history department. The pre-service teacher is the student teacher and the actual teacher. So they're telling you what they would like to be stressed when it looks at ethics. So that's the whole point of this lecture, and hopefully you enjoyed it. I'm going to this is just a really good ethical issue with that. So a very straightforward assignment for this would be just look at the Mississippi Department of Education ethics document. That's really all you need to do is look at that, look at the standards. Many educators that I've talked about didn't even know it existed. They were like, there's an ethics document? So we try to show this to our students. So we definitely try to show this. I'm always shocked that graduate students have never read this, but that's fine. Now you know about it. So the question this article begs to ask, as well as everyone else does, is, okay, you've got ethics in place for the state of Mississippi or any state. You have educators and pre-service teachers who are asking for ethics training. Why are colleges not training people on ethics? So that would be a very good question. So that's where we go with that. Hope you enjoyed the lecture, and I thank you for listening.